I'll start the recording now. Okay. So, just to let you know, we kind of went over the basics, and we generally go with about 5 minutes of time to speak. And so Carolina will keep time, and it's a soft 5 minutes. It doesn't mean you have to cut yourself off in mid-sentence, but that you can finish your thought, or somebody can finish a reflection or anything like that. And again, just to restate, the topic is how best might we build an XR facilitator army to basically educate people and get them involved in the democratic process. Is there anybody who would like to start particularly? No. Okay. So we'll role model if I'll speak to Carolina, and we'll just kind of go through the first one. You can see what happens. And then Carolina will choose someone, and hopefully you feel up to speed. If there's something you need, let us know. This is it can be sometimes like a contest to see how much you can memorize. It's not. It's really more about creating a bridge. So if you are listening, you can stop the speaker for a moment, reflect, go on. And also, if you're a speaker, you can also correct people and stuff. So it's about building a bridge, not winning a contest. So, okay.
Okay.
All right. So will you listen to me, Carolina?
Yes, 5 minutes.
5 minutes. All right.
Okay.
Start the clock. Okay. So I have been, I've been in these trainings for a few times, for about a month now, I guess, with Paul, and it's very exciting. And the first thing I want to say is that I get a lot out of these meetings because I meet people who are totally strangers who share some of the deep concerns and values that I have. So I'll stop there.
So what I'm hearing, you saying that you're participating right now for a few weeks in
Mm-hmm.
those sessions with Future Democracy Hub.
Mm-hmm.
And what is interesting for you, you always meet people who you don't know, and you can learn a lot from them.
Yes. Yeah. And I admire them. And so we've also had, for even longer than this particular training, we've had an XR cafe, of Empathy Circle Cafe, to sort of try to, we were very active during the October actions, to try to listen to XR members and offer them support. I'll stop there.
So you reminding about another circle that happens
Mm-hmm.
every week where we support XR activists with empathy circle and practicing empathic listening,
Mm-hmm.
especially since October Rebellion. It is quite important.
Right. And then I also, just to establish my bona fides, I also participated in the October 25th action here in downtown San Francisco, where we brought the empathy tent and listened to XR members and anybody else who needed it. To stop.
And you recalling the actions you participated in October Rebellion, where you have been in a empathy tent and you were listening to activists during the action. It was sort of supporting on the street
Mhm.
activists of XR.
Right. And what I see overall is that we have to come together on some shared goals, some shared values and goals. Values and how to get there, whether we're going to get there through authoritarian forced means or we're going to get there through community democratic means. Um, and then also what those goals are. We want to stop climate change. What might be the most effective way to do that? I'll stop there.
Oh, so you think that we all, no matter what affiliation, have to come together and decide what are our common goals, and if we want to achieve them, in what way we want to achieve them. So it might be more violent or more non-violent form of action,
Hmm.
especially in context of climate change, climate catastrophe. This is very important to find common goals, common values, and to choose the way we want to achieve them.
Hmm.
That's what you mean?
Yes, I do. And so there's somewhat of a paradox. It's a kind of open system that has to be very focused. I'll stop there.
So you're talking about the system that should be very open to focus, to
No,
be focused.
I'm saying it's paradoxical. In the one sense, we need to listen and gather and, all people together and listen to them and develop. On the other hand, we have to come to some really common agreements, and if we're going to be effective, we have to have action. So that means a
Mhm.
broad agreement, but we have to do it through consensus.
So if I understand you correctly, you mean that from one side we need to talk and deliberate a lot, but to avoid climate catastrophe, we need to take action. So it's kind of paradoxical situation, kind of full of contradiction. I
Yeah, sure.
think, yeah.
Seeming contradictions. We will say, okay. All right. Thank you, Carolina. I feel fully heard.
Okay, thank you. So I will choose Franek.
Yeah, I'll gladly be your active listener.
Okay. Um, I set time. First of all, I'm a little bit distracted because I lost my connection. I have to reboot everything and set up different routers. So it was kind of crazy in rush to come back. So I feel a little bit distracted. I stop there.
All right. So you feel distracted and kind of messy because you have some issues with the internet, and it really messed up your schedule, and you kind of
Yeah.
feel not here, not
Yeah,
not
not
not yet
focused.
here. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So I have to focus back to our talk. And uh, what can we do to build facilitators army? Well, we were talking about this word army. We already agreed that we have problem, but this is whole decision mostly what to do with it, um, and his team. Um, I think that the most important thing is practicing, actually practicing every day personal attitude and building regenerative culture. It might sound weird, but I believe it's connected. I stop there.
So what you said was that you've on the beginning you mentioned that you don't really like the name army. I hope I got it right. Yeah. So you mentioned that you don't like the word army, and then I don't know if I caught that right, but you said that we should focus on actually working like in the field. I think I haven't get you right.
I said that we should focus to build. large group of facilitators, army of facilitators, we need to focus on personal attitude, practicing and changing and developing regenerative culture. That's what I mean. It might sound weird, but that's what I believe we need to do.
Okay, so you believe that we should focus on actually working in the field of actually getting practice and building bigger community of people that are helping each other.
But I particularly call it regenerative culture, which is part of our movement. And why I think this way? Because if we build strong community that is good in deliberation, in building relations, in communicating, finding consensus, deliberating, it will be easy. Every one of us will be a facilitator, will be a good facilitator, or be able to get this position. It's kind of by doing something else, creating this. But that's what I believe has to happen.
Oh, right. So you feel that we should focus on the
Regenerative culture.
regenerative culture. That's a hard word. Regenerative culture, because if we have this, we in the future we will have a community that is listening to each other, that is actually working out the problems, not silencing them, but actually having a proper discussion and actually doing something, not only discussing but having an action.
Yeah, and such a community is full of good facilitators by themselves. So this is the thing.
So the youth community will have. You're saying that the good community will have lots of facilitators, and there will be it. What I feel is that you're saying that they will just spawn naturally. That it's a process that will go naturally. If we have regenerative culture, we will have facilitators.
Yes. Thank you. I feel fully heard. That's actually my time. Thank you.
All right. Cool. Thank you. Peter, can you be my active listener?
Sure. Hi.
Hi. I choose you because I spent two years of my life in Wales, so I feel I feel somewhere some kind of connection to you.
Where did you stay? Well, am I allowed to ask questions?
Just Wrexham.
Right.
All right. So to the point. On the beginning, how I'll just state how I feel, because I feel sort of messy. Yeah, it was very hard to focus on what Kalina was saying, because I just came back from another XR meeting. I'm sort of out there just trying to work out, and I'm also studying, and it's really hard to have a time to actually properly do something. And I will stop here just to give you time.
Yeah, so you feel messy. You find it hard to focus as you've been in other Extinction Rebellion meetings. You're also studying, and you find it hard to find the time to do all of this.
Yes, and about the word, I really do not like the word army. Getting to the point, I don't like the word army. Like, I feel really strongly about the word army, and I really do not like that. And that's just a side note. How we could build a better community is what I do is I try to work where I live, and you guys are kind of my intellectual group. I go to you to gain knowledge, and then I use my knowledge somewhere else. And for me, that could be a focus for some people, to be here to gain knowledge and then use that knowledge somewhere in the field, actually doing stuff, actually working out problems and trying to solve something. Yeah, I will pass here.
Okay. Yeah. So you really don't like the word army, and you feel really strongly about that, and you want to find out how to build a better community, and you want to work with your friends and colleagues and exchange your knowledge and experience and try to come up with a plan.
Yeah, especially I feel that I'm, rather than that, I meant that you guys are like some kind of thinking tank, and people like me go to you, go to the things like future democracy to gain knowledge, and then with that knowledge work locally in the groups in the field.
Right. So you want to come to these forums, these empathy circles, these future democracy webinars to gain the knowledge and then impart it and discuss it with your friends and colleagues.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's all for now. I feel heard for now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Frank. That's me then, is it? All right. So my first time. So Jane.
Yeah, I'm here.
Will you be my active listener?
I will.
Okay. Can I just ask? Do we go around this process several times? Is that how it works?
Yes, we do. And generally you can go back and forth. Once you talk to Jane, everybody will have had their first turn, and so you're not locked into going exactly the same way. You might want to speak to different people, and you might also want to notice who hasn't spoken in a while. That's it.
Right. Okay. Great. Okay. So Future Democracy Hub. How do we mobilize people en masse? How do we build an army, or let's say, what should we say? Let's say a movement of facilitators that can enable all of those conversations. It's something that I've personally been working on for around 15 years now. So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are sort of coming to this new. But for me, it's something, it's been my sort of passion and my work. And when I've been to the conferences, all the leading speakers, they've always talked about democracy being the answer. So about 15 years ago, I set this to be my sort of focal point, that this is something that needs to be solved if we're going to solve sort of local and global challenges. Thank you.
I hear you saying that you've been involved in thinking about how to build a community of facilitators for about the last 15 years, and it's been your passion.
Yeah. So I started off really looking at communities, thinking we don't really know what resources we've got to be able to make changes. So that's really where my journey started, was around baselining, so that we can understand what our carbon footprints are and well-being indexes, this sort of stuff. I thought we really need to know what empty shops and all of these sort of resources that we've got available, to be able to use those resources for projects that we might want to implement in the community.
So I heard you say that you felt that the first thing that needed to be done was an audit of the kinds of resources that could possibly be used to build this community of facilitators.
Yeah, that's where my journey started 15 years ago. And then around 10 years ago, we realized that we could build these tools, but really the communities need a way to be able to discover those tools and to get excited about them, to prioritize them, and then to learn more. So they need to take ownership of all the things that we want them to do.
So I heard you say that it's important alongside the process of building our own skills and understanding and developing our tools. It's important for the communities that we're wanting to take those on to be able to have an ownership of them and to actually feel as if they belong to them in some way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was sort of a big learning point. I spent five years building lots of tools, and then the question was, how do you get people to use them? Because you can't go into it's very difficult to go into a community and say you need to be doing X, Y, and Z, even if it's a great project. People don't like to be told what to do. So that's where I started then focusing on grassroots democracy and thinking that this is really a unique, it's an issue that is common to all organisations, geographic communities, schools, and any type of membership organisation has this problem.
So you're describing a problem which is the feeling of not really owning the processes by which they're governed in lots of different institutions. That ownership is the essential ingredient. Yeah,
and there's a sort of a tokenistic democratic process in all of these already, right? All schools have pupil voice or student voice. All communities generally have some sort of community voice, and organizations tend to have staff voice or something like that. But when you look at those processes, they're almost always inauthentic. If you ask the stakeholders, how do you feel about this process? Are you feeling empowered? Are you feeling heard? Generally, it's not the case.
So you're describing a situation in which there's a kind of token democracy or participation going on in almost all the institutions that you have experience of or that you know about, but that it's not really genuinely owned by the participants and they don't actually feel as if they have a voice in those processes. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I'm not speaking for everyone, but I'm just saying, broadly speaking, the democratic culture is pretty poor. And if you go into the schools, I mean, we've worked in a lot of schools, and kids, for instance, they get elected onto the student council, and that's very exciting. But then there's two issues. One is they find it really difficult to then engage the wider community of say, that school, and they find that student council is not action orientated. So you're using a school student council as an example of the kind of problems that arise from these democratic processes where people don't really feel empowered. And you're saying that people who are involved in them can't really connect with the wider community and they don't actually feel empowered in their positions within them. Yeah, thanks. So that's some context, and maybe we'll follow up later. Okay, so I guess I feel heard. My turn to speak, and I'll ask Bill,
listening,
active listener, in the interest of completing the circle.
Okay.
So, to put myself in context, checking the time. To put myself in context, I've been a facilitator almost all my adult life. I was initially involved in nonviolent direct action in the peace movement in the UK in the early 1980s. A lot about the processes of developing affinity groups and facilitating groups using active listening processes through the activity of doing that. And that was passed on to us via the anti-nuclear power movement which came from the west coast of Australia during the 70s. So I feel as if we're part of a long tradition, and I'm sure it goes from elsewhere, but that's my particular way into this.
Okay, so your background is that you've been a social activist for many years, starting inheriting the anti-nuclear movement in Australia from the 70s and moving on to the progressive peace movements in the 80s.
Yes, and it was inherited from the US in the 70s, and I was active in the UK in the 80s.
In the UK. Thank you.
Yeah. So also agree that I don't want to use the word army. I think it's a mistake. And I like the word community. I like the word team. and I feel as if we've got a few. I've got a few practical ideas of how to move forward in developing this movement or this team. Number one for me is role modeling. So wherever I am, whatever groups I'm involved with, whatever meetings I'm in, I role model and I invite other people to use the processes.
Okay, so you have some ideas, and one of the things that the first on your list is role modeling. In other words, being the change you want to see.
Indeed. And I feel also that one of the ways that I can help things to move along in terms of growing the team is to offer to facilitate in various situations. And I see that as one of the key things that I can contribute to our climate change movement, but to also a broader movement for change in the way that society operates. So I offer to facilitate so that people can see and experience how much more enjoyable and empowering it is to be involved in a meeting which is facilitated in the kinds of ways that we use.
Okay, so one of the direct services that you would offer is to facilitate meetings using active listening and a lot of the skills that we talked about today.
Indeed, so that people can experience it, because when they experience it, then they want more of it and they start to see that it exists. Otherwise, how else are people going to know that it exists?
So really important and essential into your learning and teaching is the experience, because then people need to have the felt experience to get the depth to then continue on that road.
Exactly. And the consequence of that has been in my local Extinction Rebellion group, which is very newly formed. Nobody in it apart from myself who has any facilitator skills, that they have now asked me to lead a workshop to help people to learn facilitator skills. And they did that not because I offered it, but because they experienced what it's like to have a good facilitator.
Okay, so you just I'm part of a newly formed XR group, and they asked you to be a facilitator not because of your self-promotion, but because they experienced your facilitation skills and they value them.
Yeah, and they asked me particularly to lead a workshop to help other people to learn facilitation skills. So it's spreading, it's growing.
Right. So it's the experience that people having the experience of the facilitation and the active listening thing it has been proven to be incentive, and the movement's growing.
Indeed. And my second or my third idea for how we can strengthen our community is through peer support, which has been invaluable to me throughout my whole practice, not only as a facilitator in social change movements, but also in community music, which is my big passion. And community music facilitators use all of these skills all the time in the music making context. And we benefit massively from peer support. So we get together in order to share our experiences.
Okay, so the third leg of your support is peer support. And that's been very important, both in your social change and your community music.
And that's fine. I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you. All right. Let's see. All right, Peter, would you listen to me?
Sure, Bill.
Thank you. Okay. So we're presented with a seeming paradox. How do a bunch of individuals, free individuals, come together in unity and community and focus? And as many of the speakers said before, I believe having the experience of being listened to and empathy is crucial to that. And I'll stop there.
So you're faced with this paradox of how to build a community that is listening and has empathy, but then also needs to act quickly with leadership.
Correct. And so one of the things is how do we reach out to the population as a whole? And so there are various means being chosen, some more or less confrontational, And I was thinking about, especially after listening to stories of burnout and people in jeopardy and things like that, using this facilitative circle, the empathy circle, as not just a intra community thing, but actually an outreach tool. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so there's a big question about how do we reach out to the population as a whole. I got various ideas and views around that. Lots of people getting burnout, as you say, and you're thinking that potentially this empathy circle model could be one, perhaps part of a bigger process or part of the process to do that.
Right, one effective tool, and so I sort of have. You have to make an impact, and then you have to communicate something, to the populace. And so I was sort of envisioning kind of like a massive bunch of empathy circles, not blocking anything, but inviting people in to discuss topics generated by citizens' assembly, and to have the public meet the core values, principles of XR through an empathy circle. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so we have to make an impact as well as obviously have lots of conversations. And you're envisaging a lot of these empathy circles where the topics, I think you're saying, are generated from citizens' assemblies.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah. And so I just think it's an inviting, non-confrontational way to invite the public to interact with the ideas generated by XR. I'll stop there.
So you believe this will be a non-confrontational way for people to engage with XR as an alternative to sitting on streets and bashing on drums?
Right, and I don't, maybe that's not, I mean, I don't have judgments about that. I mean, people are, it's pretty desperate times, and I don't know what, I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I, because of my background, I think that I would ask people who listen to this online or people in this circle, see how you feel after the circle, and generally I think you'll feel empowered and supported. And so if you're hearing information and you're feeling empowered and supported rather than threatened, you're more likely to take in that information. I'll stop there.
So you're thinking, I think you're saying proof is in the pudding. Invite people to the circles, ask them how they feel about these, and if they feel empowered, then they'll want to do more of it. Right,
and also give more consideration to the topics and the ideas generated in citizens' assemblies and public assemblies.
Right. So because they're feeling empowered, because they're enjoying the conversations, they'll also engage more in the topics.
Great. Thank you, Peter. I feel fully heard. Oh, and one thing, Peter, when you're typing, just mute it because it comes through.
Okay. I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No problem.
Okay. Right. Is that me to choose someone else? Yeah. Okie dokie. Carolina?
I will listen to you.
Thank you. So I said a little bit of context in my first 5 minutes, just about how I've been focusing on this problem of democracy for quite some time now, around 10 years specifically on this. So I started on a journey basically to build digital tools to empower communities. That started with democracy. I realized that a very basic thing was that communities don't generally know what their priorities are. And if you don't know what your priorities are, it's very difficult to move forward. So you look at a geographic community, there's no data that you could just spring up right here, right now, of the priorities of those communities. Same with schools, same with most organizations.
So you coming back to your first run when you start talking about working on democracy for some dozen years, and you were actually working on you named two issues. First was digital tools, to develop digital tools that are useful for democratic processes. And second thing was the problem of self-knowledge, so to speak, self-awareness in community, and knowing what are actually priorities in this community to resolve, to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. So I built some tools. We did a whole load of case studies in colleges, in schools, in communities, in unions. Got some great case studies. So those tools exist. And then we started to build out these tools and build out the process, because obviously once you've got a set of priorities, the next thing is how do you move a priority through to action. So we started to build basically a set of tools that fit within a community organizing framework. And we obviously realized that alongside the digital tools, you need the dialogic tools as well. So those tools might include people's assemblies, active listening, that sort of thing.
So, if I understand you correctly, you were working, observing, experimenting with different institutions like schools, universities, and other communities. And when there are already when the priorities are already set up, the thing is how to put them into actions, how to start execute them, and that's how or when you discovered that you try to build some digital tools to actually help this process, and then you discover the problem of deliberative tools like skills like active listening and other similar.
Yeah, exactly. So what we have now is a sort of a suite of digital tools that sit alongside dialogic tools, and all of these enable new behaviors inside communities. And interestingly, what came out of one of the communities not so long ago was that because there were so many environmental ideas that were prioritized through the process, they felt confident to declare a climate and ecological emergency. And this is where it sort of ties over, very much on the XR message. But so what we've sort of shown is if you go in and empower communities with participatory democracy and community organizing, they end up prioritizing environmental projects, and which is a great basis for declaring a climate and ecological emergency.
So if I understand this part correctly, you mean that using those digital tools, community you were working with uh, somehow among many different issues have been choosing climate issues as a main priority and putting this issue on the top, and that leads to announcing the climate emergency by some authorities. That's what you mean?
Yeah. So
Okay.
so we now have case studies here in Wales, the first communities declaring climate and ecological emergency through this process, and the first schools. And we've now got a process by which they can start to develop their action plan and engage the wider community on co-creating that action plan.
Okay, so you mean that right now, first communities you are working with start to execute this idea of emergency, climate emergency, and start preparing to executing the plan of actions they will undertake.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. So I will choose Jane this time.
Yes, I will listen to you, Carolina.
Mhm. Thank you. Uh, because we are talking about skills that are needed to be a good facilitator, I was wondering because in our other talks with Bill, we were talking about self-assessment. And I was thinking if we need also to build some tools of self-assessment, kind of helping people to realize if they are ready to facilitate or not. And I hope you, Susan, you, Jane, can help us to understand that because you have this experience of teaching others of the process. So this is one thing I'm wondering if we can create such tool of self-assessment.
So I'm hearing you saying that you think that each of us needs to have some means by which we feel as if we can evaluate how we're going on our journey as developing our facilitator skills through some kind of self-assessment program of some sort, and that possibly I might be able to help with that.
Yeah, and maybe, and what it could be actually, what kind of tools can be helpful to make such self-assessment. For example, a questionnaire, sort of, kind of table or rubric of self-assessment, if you think that it might be useful, and how people would feel about it. Or I'm curious if anybody of you could comment shortly, at least shortly, about such idea.
So I'm hearing that you're saying that you'd like to explore what kind of methods there are and systems by which we could assess ourselves, and that you'd like to hear people's comments on that.
Yeah, thank you. I feel actually fully heard. Thank you. So now it's your turn.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll ask Franek to be my active listener.
I will gladly do that.
Thank you, Franek. So, following on from Peter's information that he gave us, I'm very interested to know where I can find out more about what you've been doing, Peter. And following on from Carolyn's words, I have not actually come across a self-assessment system for facilitators, other than ones that have just been sort of generated within very small sort of groups of people who have got together and shared the information amongst a small number. So it would be interesting, I agree, to have a look and see what's out there in terms of that kind of self-assessment thing. And I think it is something that can help people to find a way forward as facilitators.
So at the beginning you said that you're interested in Peter's works, and it would be nice for you to learn more about that. And after that, you were following what Carolina said about the self-assessment, and that you never actually heard about nothing really planned or structured other than just facilitator sharing their feelings, and you think that it will be helpful and that it will be helpful to do such a thing. And yeah.
Yeah, and that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I will ask Bill. Bill, could you listen to me?
Yeah, I'm listening.
I think I've said everything that I have on my mind now on how we could build a better community, which is to focus on local groups and helping them out, just like I received help with my personal, not personal problem, but with problems amongst my group.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if there will be more of that, there will be people coming back to the facilitator army, to the Future Democracy project, because they would see an actual change in their life. Not to be like not to be like oversaturating things, but somehow helping them actually to see the problem from different perspective.
Okay. So you feel kind of complete about as far as how to build a facilitator army. And what you've really come to the conclusion about is that to focus on local groups and helping them, and also to take something that Jane suggested, which was peer support, and to provide support. And one, I think, and what I'm reading into is that one of the ways to help this army grow or something is to provide an ongoing support system so that people can come back from their local groups and get strategies and stuff to resolve problems.
Yes, especially I think from what I was talking with Carolina and you back then, is to provide like a mental support or some kind of that would be very helpful. Because let's be honest, doing such a thing is mentally exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that. And let's be honest, building a community, helping community in your local group can be really hard and also mentally exhausting. So having some kind of group, some kind of help somewhere back there in the internet
Mm-hmm.
can be very helpful and very calming.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is that you're going back to this idea of support and how it's really difficult. You're essentially talking about reshaping civilization. That's hard to do for any one of us. So the task is immense. And so that you'd like to see an ongoing support group in the internet for the mental difficulties. But I also feel that you're also talking about the emotional toll it takes too. There's the mental and emotional.
Yeah, I was actually mostly talking about the emotional, just
Okay, sure.
didn't put that in the words. And I think that's all from me. I feel heard. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure, Frank. My pleasure. All right. I'll talk to Jane.
Okay, hi.
Hi. Well, I see that, as I kind of see as things are developing in this small group, I see somehow consensus. I don't know if the viewers or if anybody's viewing it over time, but there's a consensus about how coming together in community and then really having as a core value supporting each other, both mentally and emotionally. And I'll stop there.
So you're hearing that you think that in the group we have a shared idea, a consensus that supporting each other in a facilitator community is something that we would like.
Yeah, and just to let people, just to know, it's a little, very, very small experiment here. We didn't have a strong man or a strong woman telling us what to do. We sort of just kind of talked, and and I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody would like to live in a supportive community where, if you're feeling troubled, you can go someplace for help. I'll stop there.
So you observed that the process by which we've been communicating during this small group has been quite equitable, without one person trying to take it or dictate. And you asked for people to correct you if you were wrong.
Right. Thank you, Jen. I feel completely heard.
Okay. Who do I want to speak to? I don't know. I feel I don't. Oh well. What do you do if you don't have anything that you want to say?
You can say, pick someone, and then you say, I don't really have something to say. And then, I know it sounds kind of corny, then we'll say, oh, I hear you don't have something to say.
Yeah, I got it.
It's a big surprise. And then you can either pass, or if you something is keyed something in you tangentially, you can go off on that if you want too.
Sure. Okay. So I'll choose Peter.
Hello there. Yes, I'm happy to listen.
And I just want to say that I'm quite happy listening to what's developing. So I'll pass on.
Thank you. Okay, Bill, would you like to listen to me?
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, so trying to string these things together. So I think, where did I get to? I think I talked about some of these pioneering case studies that managed to show, which is basically, instead of going in and again trying to convince people to declare climate emergency, this sort of stuff, if you go in with participatory democracy, budgeting, community organizing, and empowerment tools for both digital and dialogue tools, the natural outcome is lots of environmental priorities, which can then underpin schools and communities declaring climate and ecological emergency.
Okay, so you're seeing the effectiveness of the tools, both digital and also analog, if
right.
And through personal communication, that can effectively empower communities to give them the information they need to make better decisions.
Right. So XR have this desire to create a mass mobilization strategy. I've been asked to sort of feed into that, and the reason being, I think, is because there's a very simple strategy here, which is to support communities and schools and groups to declare a climate and ecological emergency. And that leads to them, the next step is to create an action group, and the next step is to create a climate and ecological action plan. And obviously, when you're doing that action plan, that needs facilitation, right? So that we need an army or a lot of facilitators, right, to facilitate that. So that in the UK, for instance, there's 10,000 communities. There's, 30,000 schools. There's a lot, right? So that's going to need an army of facilitators to be able to make that happen.
Okay. So that's a lot. So then you have these digital and personal tools, and then you give the people. The people, number one, have to be supported by XR getting the information. Number two, by being empowered, then they have to form a group around it, an action group. And then number three is an action plan. And in that action plan includes tremendous capacities for distribution. And so therefore we need, if not an army, a plethora of facilitators.
A plethora, it's a good name, yeah, exactly. So this is a very simple strategy, right, as far as somehow we've got to boil down these incredibly complex problems into simpler strategies that people with minimal capacity can crack on with, and resources.
So basically, we have to be able to organize the information and action in simple enough ways and achievable enough ways so that people can then do them and then experience some success, and then have them integrated into the larger whole so they'll be effective in creating greater change.
Right, and another way, and so basically then we can start to look at the ways of making that more and more efficient. So for instance, one of those things that we can do is come together to consolidate the highest impact projects that we know of, the projects that have got proven impact, social and environmental impact on communities. So they would be energy projects, food related projects, environmental related projects. Consolidate those so that people can discover them and then they can prioritize them and replicate them.
Okay, so going back with, I guess also with the XR, is that we have a lot of the solutions available to us. The idea is to organize that information, make it available so that people can then use that information in an effective way.
Right, exactly. Because at the moment, when we tend to be in, let's say, for instance, we're inspired on a video on TED, when we watch TED, we see someone talking about hydroponics or some food growing project in Denver or something like that. Generally, what we can do is share it into Facebook, right? But Facebook is social media, right? It's not tailor-made for community organizing. So if we can take these inspirational templates that might be much more built out for replication, i.e. they've got lesson plans on them and they've got really good case studies and all of these links, then we can seed them into these communities that then can prioritize them and move them through to actions and tangible outcomes.
Okay, so you're restating, you know, the idea of really taking where, but I think really data-driven, provable, scientifically rigorous, you know, ideas and strategies, and then making them understandable to, you know, the common populace, and then give them a venue to act on them.
Right, and it comes back to the paradox you were talking about, Bill, which is like, how do we have this? We want democracy, but we also need leadership. And so this potentially starts to bridge that gap where the leadership comes from, you know, the best ideas being consolidated. So you're not just necessarily talking about random things, but the democracy comes in. What do we want to actually do? Which of these amazing projects do we want to prioritize for our community? Who's going to be involved? You know, how are we going to adapt it for our local needs? And then all of that, just because just adapting and replicating a really good template is a big enough challenge, let alone trying to discover all the information.
Okay, so you're feeling that, you know, to basically give an array of these scientifically proven, tested strategies, and then making those available to the, you know, to people so that they can, again, use it. I'm kind of repeating, and so I might have mixed some nuance there. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you're getting the idea of, you know, trying to bridge that paradox. So the democracy comes in. Oh, the democracy, that's right. So the science comes in from the presentation and the good information, and the democracy comes in from the people prioritizing which one they want to do first.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Anything else?
Thank you. Now I feel heard.
Okay, great. All right. I'll talk to Carolina.
Okay, I'm listening.
So I'm really, how can one not be excited by Peter? And I'm just, so all sorts of ideas are kind of like exploding in my mind, which is fun. Things right now, I mean, things are pretty depressing in some places, and it's really therapeutic to hear people who are excited about ideas and possibilities. So I'll stop.
So you saying, in short, that you appreciate, you are kind of amazed and appreciate the I don't know how to say that, involvement, engagement, and of all of us in the whole idea, and trying to find the best solution.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that both Franek and I think we talked about, and that is support. It's we all have our doubts and our kind of or doubtful side and pessimistic side, and when you see someone coming up with positive solutions, the burden of that that pessimistic side is shared and becomes lighter.
So you see that all of us particularly Franek noticed this need for support, but also Jane,
Yeah.
this need for support, and because almost every one of us has those moments that we don't feel very well about our chances to succeed. We need this emotional and intellectual or spiritual or mental, whatever, support to each other, because when we talk about it, it becomes easier to deal with this climate negativity.
Right. And as a thought experiment for those who might be watching, just think about if you could meet 5 strangers like we are interacting with each other today, and you could be assured of someone who is interested in your well-being and willing to listen to you. We'll stop there.
So you sort of speaking to those who might watching this video about this very strange situation when 5 strangers talk to each other in a friendly way, supporting each other discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I want to suggest where I'm listening to Peter and everybody and Jane, where the empathy circle fits in, because that's an excellent kind of icebreaker way to engage the community, way to tamp down people's fears and things like that, and build community in order to take those next steps. That's where this sort of foundational piece comes in.
And you, if I understand you correctly, you believe that empathy circle is a great tool to build community and mutual support and develop all other tools.
Thank you, Caroline. I feel very heard.
Okay, thank you. Who didn't talk for a while? I feel a little bit lost. Maybe Franek didn't speak for quite long.
Or listen, because we have about 5 minutes before we're pulled back in.
Okay.
Yes, I will listen to you.
Okay, so I was trying, it was very difficult meeting today for me. I still had some problems with focusing on and proper reflecting. Somehow maybe I'm very tired today. Yeah.
So you're saying that you still have some kind of problem with focusing. You feel tired, sort of not here, and yeah.
But anyway, I was trying to gather ideas, and I realized that we probably need to name some skills we, as a facilitator, should present, maybe, like the one that is the most obvious, ability to listen actively, but also, for example, ability to sense the temperature of the meeting, what's happening in the whole group, not just with one person, but the whole group. So those are kind of elements we have to name, so that for facilitator or the person who wants to be facilitator will be easier to realize what we need to do. So this is one thing. I stop there.
Right. So you feel that we should find and name things that a good or a proper facilitator should have to actually to make sort of a guideline for a good facilitator.
Yeah. And what I'm taking from this meeting today is, first, obviously, is the origin culture, which I said, That's obvious. But another thing is the support group, which is very important. But few, and this still, well, after what Jane said, I think that maybe self-assessment too, sort of. I stopped there because it's very complicated.
All right, so what you're taking from this call is what you said, that we need a region culture. What I was mainly talking about, which is self-support, and what Jane was talking about, which is the self-assessment that
Yeah,
we
I
need
was asking.
Oh, so yeah. She
Yeah.
was following on that. Yeah.
But I
About
also,
self-assessment.
but
Yeah,
I
sorry.
also, but I also think about role-playing meeting sessions and creating role-playing people's assembly and role-playing citizens assembly. This is one idea. And the second idea is, I think, connected to region culture. We have to create campaign for regaining time. I believe time factor is crucial. Probably you will not have chance to
Oh, there are like 5
reflect that.
seconds. I'm not gonna even try. Sorry.
Oh,
Cool.
But we'll have a feedback. You can kind of give it a
Okay.
minute. So people are popping in. Is everybody here? We have Bill? Yeah, okay. So we
Bill,
want
you
to.
can stop.
Oh yeah, you
Maybe
can.
recording.
Bill and